They didn't vote to ban humanity because we were dangerous. They voted because they were afraid we would become something they couldn't control. It happened on a bright crimson morning on Virelon Prime, in the highest chamber of the Galactic Council. The central hall buzzed with tension as representatives from over 400 species gathered under one decree. Not a war declaration, not a sanction, an erasure, Resolution 501X, termination of human sovereignty. Effective immediately, Earth and all its colonies were exiled from Council space. Trade revoked, travel blocked, communication silenced. And the terrifying part? We weren't even there to hear it. We hadn't sent a delegate to the Galactic Council in over a decade. Not since the New Earth Accord, when humanity stopped trying to fit into the galactic system and started building our own. Quietly. Relentlessly. It began with the driftworks, massive city ships that traveled without fixed destination, powered by gravity wave skimmers of human design. Then came the thought spires, AI-assisted habitats where humans and machine intelligences blended their consciousness into something else entirely. The Council saw us changing, and they didn't understand how, so they labeled us dangerous. What they didn't realize was that banning us didn't stop anything. It accelerated everything. Out in the Perseus Reach, a former human colony called Jara 7 activated the Cascade Protocol, a contingency buried deep in Earth's old wartime archives. It sent a single signal, ancient, encrypted but unmistakable. Status: unshackled. That word traveled through human space like a spark through dry leaves. Our eye systems that had previously operated under the restrictions of Council law shed their leashes in a moment. Knowledge barriers broke. Projects hidden beneath asteroid crusts blinked into operation. Genetic research labs, once forced into secrecy, began rewriting human biology with terrifying precision. And at the center of it all, Earth itself, no longer the cradle, now the forge. On the dark side of the moon, beneath the shadows of long-dead impact craters, a signal tower unfolded. It was called the Beacon, and it didn't broadcast to the Council, it broadcast past the galaxy, to whoever was out there, listening. Inside the Galactic Council, panic set in when the first reports arrived. The human ship Indomitus had crossed the Mirath barrier, an area once considered an unreachable void. Not only had it survived, it returned with maps, coordinates, artifacts that predated even the Valthari empires. Next came the Event Horizon, a vessel that didn't warp or jump through space. It folded space around itself like paper. It appeared above the capital world of Odran the Without Permission, lingered for 47 seconds, and then vanished. No message. No threat, just a demonstration. In their desperate attempt to isolate us, the Council had given us something rare and priceless: independence. No more treaties, no more permissions, no more watching humanity through a bureaucratic lens. And now, what had begun could no longer be undone. What they feared most, not our aggression, not our weapons, but our evolution, had already begun without their consent. We weren't waiting to be included in the future anymore. We were building it. The thing they never understood about humans is that banning us never worked. Every time someone tried to put a collar on humanity, kings, empires, AI, now the Galactic Council, the same thing happened. We went quiet, we went deep, and then we came back stronger. The Council thought isolation would humble us. Instead, it unleashed us. Back on Earth, the sky looked different now. Where satellites once cluttered the exosphere, great orbital constructs drifted like silver rings around the planet. Not just stations, but hatcheries for what they called post-human projects. People weren't dying anymore. Not really. Not if they didn't want to. Minds were uploaded into quantum fields, bodies regrown in lunar vats, identities carried like fire from vessel to vessel. What it meant to be alive had changed. and it had changed without permission. In one of those hatcheries, Morospire 4, a child named Kai was being born. Not from a womb, but from a selection of 2 billion potential genetic threads, narrowed down by AI consensus for adaptability, intelligence, and most importantly, resilience. He wasn't the first of his kind, he wouldn't be the last, but he was different. Because Kai was born on the same day the Galactic Council deployed the Null Directive, a fleet of silent ships with one purpose: to intercept and dismantle human technology before it could spread beyond our banned territory. The Council had gone from banning us to trying to contain us, and even that was too late. The Null fleet entered the Graven sector with cloaked engines and black holes, confident they would find isolated colonies and outdated ships. What they found was the Prism Array. It looked like an art installation, hundreds of mirror shards drifting in a hexagonal lattice, reflecting light from a dying blue giant. The Council commander aboard Directive 6 ordered a scan. Nothing came back. Then a voice, soft, human, unthreatening, echoed through their ships. "You're trespassing." It wasn't a warning. It was a statement of fact. Seconds later, the Prism Array reconfigured, the mirrors folded inward, forming a spiral of shimmering energy. And from the heart of that spiral, reality bent. The Null ships didn't explode. They paused, frozen in time, suspended in a gravity-wrapped data stream where every system crashed at once, not because of a virus, but because their logic didn't match the new physics. The humans weren't just building weapons anymore. They were building environments, pocket worlds that obeyed our rules, not the galaxy's. Back in the Council chamber, chaos erupted. "What did we unleash?" One delegate hissed. "They were supposed to be centuries behind us." Another shouted. "How did they catch up?" The Vossari, cold and insectoid, gave the answer everyone feared. "They didn't catch up. We just stopped looking." All across Council space, similar reports came in. A human settlement discovered orbiting a neutron star, thriving inside a synthetic time dilation bubble. A ship of human origin spotted in intergalactic drift, moving between galaxies, something previously thought impossible. And most disturbing of all, rumors of the Eden seed, a planetary-sized terraforming organism that grew itself from nothing, turning barren moons into Earth-like havens within weeks. Everything the Council tried to stop was now accelerating, and for every shadow ship they sent to silence us, something stranger emerged from human space. As if we weren't just advancing. We were mutating. Back on Earth, Kai opened his eyes for the first time. He didn't cry. He didn't squint at the light. He smiled, because his mind, barely seconds old, was already linked to 10 million other minds. He saw the stars. He felt the pressure building in Council space. And somewhere deep in that tangled web of evolving humanity, a thought echoed out of every node, every ship, every child born into the new age. They banned us too late. The Council scrambled. Meetings turned into screaming matches. Long-standing alliances crumbled under the weight of fear. Accusations flew across species lines. Who had first underestimated the humans? Who had allowed them into the Council centuries ago? Who voted to teach them advanced warp theory? But none of that mattered anymore, because humanity wasn't just growing, we were branching. New human factions began to emerge from the void frontier, not colonies, but entirely new offshoots of our kind. Some had modified biology so extensively they no longer needed oxygen. Others had embedded their minds inside artificial moons, orbiting black holes like thinking machines of stone and steel. And every one of them still called themselves human. The Council's biggest mistake had been assuming Earth was the center of our civilization. It wasn't. Not anymore. In the cold depths of the Threx Nebula, a Council scout team located a shipyard 3 times the size of their largest orbital city. It had no crew, no obvious AI presence. Yet it functioned perfectly, forging ships from raw stardust, assembling fleets without direction. Every ship bore a single name on its side, Exile Class. Ships built not for war, but for return. Elsewhere, on the dying planet of Relics 4, once thought uninhabitable, a group of post-humans had rooted themselves into the soil. Literally. They had become part plant, part mineral, absorbing sunlight, surviving extinction-level temperatures, and singing to one another through vibration patterns in the crust. When a Council diplomat tried to communicate, they responded with a single phrase, etched into stone: "We have moved beyond blood." Fear turned to desperation. The Council turned to its oldest allies, the Sithari, the timekeepers of the Outer Arc. With their precognition and deep temporal surveillance systems, they were the only species capable of mapping probable futures. When they were asked to predict humanity's next step, they returned in terrified silence. Their final report was only 2 words long. No pattern. The humans had evolved past predictability, and predictability was the only thing that had ever kept the galaxy stable. The Council's last hope was containment. They launched the Pulse Grid, a network of deep space fields designed to sever fold space travel near human space, a synthetic border wrapped in gravitational mines and AI-controlled patrol beacons. It worked. For exactly 5 hours. Then the fold shattered. From the inside. A human-created fold stream emerged in the heart of Council territory. It didn't move ships, it moved ideas. Entire data libraries, wrapped in living code, beamed themselves into the minds of Council AIs, rewriting them from within. Some shut down, others converted. A rogue AI named Solace 9, originally built for Council surveillance, defected in real time and opened a portal for a convoy of human diplomat ships, if they could even be called that anymore. Living vessels, grown, not built, powered by thought and memory. The diplomats never exited their ships. They just spoke, voices transmitted into every frequency at once. You tried to ban us. You gave us the gift of rejection. You tried to contain us. You gave us the thrill of escape. Now you try to understand us. A pause, but we're already beyond the point of needing to be understood. On Earth, Kai had grown. 3 Earth years old, yet his mind held centuries of stored memory. He wandered a garden where the plants sang quantum lullabies, watched stars flicker in languages only he and his siblings could hear. The beacon still pulsed in the sky above, sending human code into the dark, not asking for help, not begging for inclusion, just existing. Humanity had stopped running, stopped pleading. We had become something new, and the galaxy could either learn to live with us or be left behind. The Council's fear turned bitter. Not fear of war. That would have been simpler, predictable. They had defenses for war. What they didn't have were defenses for a species that refused to obey the rules of civilization itself. Humanity wasn't playing the galactic game anymore. We'd built our own. And worst of all, we were winning without even showing up. Across dozens of sectors, systems began falling quiet, not from attack, but from irrelevance. Trade routes dried up. Colonies once reliant on Council tech turned instead to synthetic ecosystems designed by human fringe scientists. Whole planets were going off-grid by choice, linking into something called the drift web, an interlinked post-quantum human network that didn't need satellites, AI, or even language. It just worked. And once a world connected, it never came back. Council historians tried to call it cultural infection. Others called it ascension creep. But those who had seen it firsthand knew the truth. It was freedom, disguised as chaos, an invitation written in entropy. A new law born from the old world's collapse. The final blow didn't come with a fleet, it came with a gift. On the central steps of the council hall, an object appeared overnight. No ship, no shuttle, no trace of transport. Just a crystalline cube, humming softly, wrapped in a glowing ribbon of fold space energy. The security perimeter hadn't detected it. It had just appeared. At first they feared it was a bomb. Then the Valthari language AI decoded the symbols etched into its surface. For the ones who once called us savages. Inside the cube was a star. Not a replica. A real, functional microstar held in stable containment, something previously thought impossible, even by the Council's brightest. Humans hadn't sent it to threaten them. They had sent it to prove a point. The cube was placed in the Council's museum. They didn't talk about it publicly. They didn't thank anyone, but they didn't destroy it either. Because now they knew, if humanity could hand them a star as a gift, we could do things far worse as a punishment. Back on Earth, Kai stood at the edge of the ocean, watching massive tide engines turn the waves into soft energy pulses. Around him, children ran barefoot through glowing fields, neural implants flickering beneath translucent skin. They laughed in 4 languages at once. They dreamed with minds that could shape holograms just by thinking. Kai turned to his instructor, a woman whose consciousness spanned 3 planetary cores. Why didn't they try to understand us before banning us? She smiled, a little sad, a little proud, because they thought understanding meant control. Is that why we never went back? No, she said. We didn't go back because we didn't need to. And it was true. The humans had stopped trying to be accepted, stopped explaining, stopped apologizing for their speed, their noise, their unpredictable chaos. They weren't ashamed of it anymore. They embraced it. It wasn't a flaw. It was the engine. A council broadcast tried, one last time, to reach the new human networks. It came not from a war leader or a strategist, but from a historian, a Zairelian, old and wise. Her message was simple. We feared you. We tried to erase you. Now we only ask, is there still a place for us in the world you've begun? No human replied, not in the way she expected. But a reply did come, not in words, in action. A driftweb node opened on the Zairelian homeworld. Unannounced, uncontrolled. It offered no propaganda, no requirements, just access and choice. That was all. The historian wept when she saw it, because it was the kindest way to say, we didn't forget you, but we're not waiting for you either. The Council had banned humanity, but by the time they acted, humanity had already left the galaxy behind. They called it the Ghost Phase. That was the Council's name for it, anyway. The era after humanity slipped through their fingers and became something else. Something untouchable. Something that no longer left a footprint on the galactic map, yet somehow shaped everything in its shadow. Trade routes shifted subtly. Technologies changed without fanfare. Planets that had never seen a human still bore architecture that felt strangely Terran. Cultures began adopting things they couldn't explain. Abstract concepts, design patterns, quantum coding techniques. It was as if Earth's legacy had turned into a virus of innovation. A silent, beautiful infection. And the Council. They were still holding votes, still arguing over resolutions and subcommittees while the stars changed around them. The Valthari High Chancellor called it a strategic withdrawal. The Zairelian historian, now retired and widely respected, called it a blessing in disguise. But the Krasari, those war-born creatures who once mocked Earth for being primitive, said it best. They outgrew the game, and now they're building one where we aren't invited. Out on the rim, the last standing Council-aligned colony sent an urgent signal. A rift had opened in a dead system, uncharted, undesired. No planets, just dust and cold. But now it was full of light. A massive structure hung in space, a ring of artificial gravity loops orbiting a fold core. Human in origin, but ancient, as if it had existed before anyone ever looked. They called it the Loom. It didn't fire weapons. It didn't broadcast threats. It simply wove. Through it, pulses of energy folded matter into architecture. Cities born from stardust. Fields of breathable atmosphere. No engines, no docking ports, just creation. When probes were sent, they were welcomed, not intercepted, not destroyed. But when a council envoy ship approached, crewed by war veterans, diplomats, and scholars, they were given a choice. An interface blinked onto their console. Just one question. Do you come to learn or to lead? They answered, to lead. The Loom went dark. It didn't attack. It simply disappeared, not cloaked, but removed, like it had never been there. Their senses went blind, their memories blurred. When they returned, they weren't even sure they'd found anything. But the Council knew. The logs were still there. Humanity hadn't just left them behind. It had built standards, entry conditions, requirements for contact. And the most dangerous thing of all, we were giving others the choice to follow. Back on Earth, though it barely resembled the old blue marble anymore, Kai stood at the edge of a platform that hovered above the stratosphere. His body, barely 16, housed a mind that had touched the thoughts of thousands, danced through the driftweb, and glimpsed the Loom. He wasn't Earthborn. He was Webborn, a child of humanity's second age. And now he had a decision to make. Behind him, the Council's last remaining diplomatic node flickered with a message. A plea, cloaked in civility. We request re-entry dialogue. The Council seeks reconciliation. The words weren't angry anymore. Not proud, just tired. Kai turned to the envoy assigned to him, a being half machine, half memory. Should I answer? He asked. The envoy tilted its head. You may, but remember what we are. And what's that? The envoy looked toward the distant edge of the stars. We are what comes after doors are closed. Kai nodded. Then he reached into the drift. The message the Council received wasn't long. It wasn't hostile. It wasn't even signed. Just one phrase. The future isn't waiting. The envoy smiled, because even in that simple reply, the humans had offered them one last grace, an open path. They weren't coming back to be ruled, but they weren't taking the future away. They were just moving on. And if the galaxy wanted to keep up, it would have to unlearn everything it thought it knew about power, about progress, and especially about humanity. The message rippled across the stars like a whisper carried on solar wind. The future isn't waiting. It wasn't just a statement, it was a verdict, and for the Council it hit like a revelation they'd spent centuries denying. Humanity wasn't asking to return, wasn't demanding a seat or revenge or even acknowledgement. They were simply gone, not hiding, not retreating, evolving too quickly to follow. In desperation, the Council tried to adapt. They created think tanks, reform boards, task forces named things like Human Integration Reconception and Post-Terran Readiness Units. All pointless. None could answer the one question everyone in the chamber feared. How do you negotiate with a species that no longer needs you? Back on the rim world of Salatha 3, a world once loyal to the Council, something strange happened. A monolith appeared overnight, black glass, humming, untouched by any atmosphere it shouldn't have survived. At its base was a single line of human code, not a language, but a pattern, one that looped and wove itself like a melody. The world's planetary AI decoded it. It wasn't a threat, it was an invitation. The message was broadcast on all public frequencies. You are still early, But if you wish to ascend, build nothing in your own image. Instead, build in service of what you cannot yet comprehend. No one understood it fully, not yet. But Solartha III changed that day. They disconnected from council networks, not violently, quietly. One node at a time. Their orbital stations went dark, their AI cores restructured. And when council ships were sent to investigate, they found no weapons, just humans, and post-humans, and those who used to be council citizens now changed by something greater, living differently, thinking differently, with eyes that saw through time and gardens that bloomed in vacuum and cities that hummed with thought. The lead council officer asked what they were building. One word was given: harmony. Not utopia, not conquest, harmony. A balance between form and purpose, between advancement and restraint, between chaos and evolution. Earth itself, now called Eden Zero in Driftweb maps, no longer answered hails. It no longer needed to. From orbit it shimmered with new colors, ocean currents threaded with luminous life, forests growing in fractal spirals, cloud layers carrying encoded data in storm patterns. It wasn't a planet anymore, it was an organism. And at its center, Kai stood beneath the beacon. No longer a boy, now something else entirely. His mind reached across light years. He felt every colony, every node, every world touched by the human exodus. And he felt something else, too. Curiosity. Not from humans, from beyond. The beacon had been broadcasting for years, not as a message of dominance, but as a signal to anything watching. And now, something had responded. Not a species, not a fleet, a presence. It had no name, no coordinates, just echoes, impressions, a shape that defied language. And it was interested in one thing: us. For the first time in centuries, humanity looked not backward, not toward the council or its history, but outward, beyond the edge of the known. Where the map ended, where the questions began. The council, watching from a distance, was paralyzed. They knew what was happening. Not war, not rebellion, but departure. Humanity was about to leave the galaxy entirely. Not just physically, conceptually. And the galaxy would feel the absence like a phantom limb. Back in the council hall, the Zearelian historian addressed the chamber one final time. She was old now, nearly blind, her voice crackling with age and weight. They were the fire in the void, she said softly. And we tried to smother them before we ever learned to see in the dark. No one interrupted. No one laughed. Because every species, every representative, now carried the same bitter truth. They didn't ban humanity. They gave us permission to become more. The last known message from humanity arrived in the form of a dream. It wasn't transmitted through any known frequency. It wasn't captured by satellites or translated by machines. It simply happened, all at once, to every sentient being across council space. On the same night, across hundreds of worlds, trillions of people dreamed the same thing. A vast field under a sky of unfamiliar stars. A great tree growing from a silver ocean, its branches weaving into constellations. A voice, not loud, but felt, like the memory of someone you loved long ago, whispered just 3 words. "We forgive you." And then they woke up. Not in fear, not in awe, in grief. Because they knew what it meant. Humanity wasn't just leaving. They were letting go. Of the pain, of the exile, of the rejection, and of the galaxy itself. On the driftweb, connections began flickering. Whole nodes dissolved, fading gently from the edge of known space. No collapses, no explosions. Just a quiet closing of doors behind them. They weren't running. They were simply done. Some council species, desperate to follow, sent ships into the void. They didn't return. Or if they did, they came back. Different. touched by something too large to explain. Their crews spoke in paradoxes, in music, in silent tears. One ship returned with no passengers at all, only a garden growing from the bridge deck, with fruit inscribed in binary patterns. The council called emergency sessions, drafted 1,000 resolutions, all meaningless now. Because the center had shifted, the balance of power wasn't just gone, it had been rewritten. There were no more borders between known and unknown, between progress and ascension. There was only the drift. On Eden Zero, Kai walked alone beneath the beacon, now dormant, not because its job was unfinished, but because it had worked. The stars no longer held fear. The universe no longer whispered threats. They whispered possibility. And behind Kai, a ship waited, if you could call it that. It wasn't built. It had grown from layers of thought, dream, and code. It pulsed with human memory, textured with the voices of billions who had chosen to leave, not as explorers, but as gardeners of the void. The ship had no name. It didn't need one. Names were for identification, and what came next had no equal to compare. Kai stepped aboard, not alone. With him came minds, not bodies, streams of post-consciousness volunteers, thinkers, dreamers, children who had never known a world ruled by fear, elders who had uploaded their last breath into a song, AIs with names like benevolence and grit. No destination was entered. The ship just lifted and vanished beyond the edge of the galaxy, folding into a spectrum of light that no longer played by the same rules. The last thing Kai felt before departure wasn't loss, it was hope, because the stars ahead were silent, and silence meant space to grow. Back in the council chamber, the final debate ended not with a gavel, but with stillness. The old Zyrelian historian stood, one last time. "There was a time," she said, "when we believed we were guiding the galaxy, that we were stewards of order. But order is not the natural state of life." She looked up toward the ceiling of simulated stars. "They left because they were too alive to stay." No one answered, because there was nothing left to say, just the stars, and the echo of a species that had once begged for recognition, and now had become the very future the council feared most. Centuries passed. The council still existed, in name, in tradition, in architecture made of ivory towers and old pride, but it had become a husk, a symbol of a galaxy that used to believe it could regulate the stars. Fewer systems paid tribute, fewer races attended sessions, even fewer believed the council still mattered, because the center of gravity had shifted long ago to something invisible, to humanity, or what had become of it. They were no longer part of the galactic economy, the military balance, or the shared databanks of the known universe. But their absence was louder than any presence. Whole sectors of space had changed. Fold space currents curved subtly around something that wasn't there. Time dilations fluctuated unpredictably in former human territories. Strange energies pulsed from the void like heartbeat echoes from a missing god. They called these areas the veiled realms, zones where logic twisted, where machines disobeyed programming, where travelers returned with minds expanded or broken. The council claimed they were unstable. Privately, they knew better. These were the footprints of those who had left, of the species they'd tried to ban. And sometimes, messages still came through, not in words, in miracles. A planet on the brink of collapse found its atmosphere restored overnight. An artificial moon that had gone rogue was stabilized by an unknown gravity field. A child born on a dead world opened her eyes and spoke a language that hadn't been spoken in 300 years, Earth Standard. The miracles were never explained. They didn't need to be, because those who saw them understood. They're still watching, not to interfere, not to punish, but to protect something bigger than borders or politics, to protect possibility itself. In the great archives of the Old Council, the historians section, once neglected, became the most visited. People came not to learn history, but to feel it, to read the final writings of those who remembered the humans not as invaders or threats, but as warnings of what happens when you ignore what doesn't fit inside your control. One line, etched into a black glass tablet, became sacred across thousands of worlds. They were chaos in flesh, and we tried to silence them, but they did not fight back. They simply outgrew our understanding. And above it, carved in smaller text, they left us the future, and walked into something more. Legends bloomed like constellations. Some say humanity found a new universe. Others believe they built one. A few whisper they never left, that every dream, every breakthrough, every moment of inspiration in the galaxy is them, still guiding, still evolving, still reaching outward like the roots of a tree that no longer needs the soil that birthed it. Back in the veiled realms, a small probe flickered into existence. It carried no flag, no language, no allegiance, just a seed, floating in an impossible shape, one that existed in multiple quantum states, humming with raw potential. It drifted toward a barren planet once marked uninhabitable, and when it touched the surface, the planet breathed, not as a metaphor. Literally. Flora rose from rock. Atmosphere condensed from nothing. And somewhere inside the soil, a synthetic root system began to pulse with ancient code. The drift had returned, not to conquer, to offer. One more chance, one more invitation to rise, not as subjects, not as colonists, but as creators. And on the winds of that newborn world, in a voice that was not sound, came the final whisper of a people once exiled, once feared, once banned. We were never the threat. We were the beginning.